So in terms of agenda, I will be giving some very general introduction to SMS, and then go through the general processes, and then more specifically, the processes around data stewardship, change requests, data quality management. There's going to be also some brief presentation on statistics, the documentation around SMS, the use of SMS in projects and other systems, a summary of what is new in SMS since the last webinar, the plans for this year, and then a conclusion and the question and the Q&A session in the end. And I will start the webinar by talking about SMS and USRS and briefly explaining the differences and how they complement each other. So SMS is a system that provides a central source of substance data to support the selection of the correct substance in regulatory procedures. So it has enough information to distinguish between two and more substances. Then we have USRS that has a scientific identification and characterization of these substances. So it goes into a deeper level, so there's more data fields, and it is IDMP compliant. Then in terms of people managing this data, we have two teams with different sets of skills. So in SMS, we have the EMA data stewards, which are specialized in data management, such as managing change requests, adding translations, performing bulk updates, doing data quality. Then we have the substance validation group, which are the scientific substance experts. And the skills of these two teams combined enable a better substance management for the network. Then in terms of the technology, so the systems themselves, so USRS is an open source solution that implements the IDMP logic and allows scientific and correct, complete description of the substances, while SMS has the integration to all the consuming systems and regulatory procedures in the network. And by using these two systems in parallel, it is a cost-effective way to manage substance data across the network. But what I really want to reinforce is that there is only one EU substance list. So the data between these two systems, they have the same ID, and this data is being aligned via data fixes and batch processes. What we don't have yet, but it's very much desired, is a real-time synchronization between these two systems, but this still needs to be prioritized in the network portfolio. And in terms of substance records, so SMS has all the substances that are used in medicinal products that are available in USRS, but only contains a subset of the data fields. So the data fields in SMS, it's a reduced number. In USRS, it's a much higher number to enable to characterize and identify all the substances as per ADMP. So talking about data fields, I will now be focusing more on SMS. And in terms of identifiers, we have the primary identifier of all substance records, which is the SMS ID. In the past, this was known as the UTCT ID. So if you do go to UTCT, there it's going to be called UTCT ID, but it's exactly the same as SMS ID. So it's the same string of numbers that it can be used to identify the substance. Then, in addition, there's the substance EV code. So this is the identifier of the substances when they are synchronized to XCV-MPD. So they get EV code there. And because this is only applicable to XCV-MPD, then this code only exists for human substances. But the SMS ID is the primary identifier. So in terms of mandatory fields in SMS, we have the domain. So if a substance is human or veterinary, and here the main difference is that a human substance can be used for human products and veterinary products, while a veterinary substance can only be used in veterinary products. As a consequence, most of the substances are registered with the domain human. Then we have the status. So there's two status in SMS, current and non-current. So a current substance can be used in all consuming systems. A non-current substance cannot be used in any consuming system. And these two status of substances, they are both available in the substance export, but I will be talking about that later. Then we have the substance type. So if a substance is a chemical or a protein or a vaccine or a specified substance, plus many others. Then we have substance name. The substance might have many names, but all substances must have a preferred term. So this is the minimum. Then it might have an alias. So an alias is a synonym in the English language, and it's also possible to have translations in all EU languages, which then are managed in the data field language. Then we have the name source. So all names in English must have a source, and this is where the name was seen. It can come from an SMPC, it can come from an INN, it can come from pharmacopoeia, it can come from an external source. So there's many sources that we use to register substances, and that information is kept in this field. And then we have a field to manage confidentiality, which we call data classification, and this can be public or restricted. And I'll be talking about this data field in particular in a few slides. Then there's several optional data fields, and the ones that you can see in this slide are just an example, the most important ones, but there's many more. So we have a comment section, and this is a free text field that we are currently using to add the replacement substance. So when we change a substance from current to non-current, so when we nullify the substance, then we add the SMS ID of the substance that it's replacing this non-current substance. And this is also available in the export. Then there is a section for codes where many codes can be managed. I'm just focusing on two on this slide, which is the unique ingredient identifier, so the UNI, and this is the FDA substance identifier, also available on the export. So whenever you register a substance, if it is available a UNI, we will also register it in SMS. And then we have a code which we call the Substance Validation Group Cleansed Flag, which we use to mark if a substance has already been reviewed by the SVG or not. I'll be talking about this data field later as well. Now, For the next two slides, I will be talking about confidentiality, since this is a recurrent topic in substance discussions. And for you to understand the current scenario, I wanted first to explain how confidentiality used to be managed before SMS existed. So before we had SMS, human substances were registered in XCV-MPD. And the way XCV-MPD was built was with two different human lists. So there was a list called approved substances, which we now call authorized, and these substances were registered by EMA data stewards, and they were publicly visible. So if a substance was registered on this list, all XCV-MPD users could see it, and they could use it in any products. And then there was a separate list, independent, called development substance list. And this list was managed directly by sponsors. However, it was only visible to the sponsor that registered that particular substance. So, as you can understand, this structure led to data quality issues, because there might be 2 or 3 or 5 sponsors investigating the same substance, and that would mean that the substance would be registered multiple times. And since there was no EMA validation, some substances were registered in a very undefined way, sometimes just with a company code and nothing else. And that's how we ended up with 5,514 development substances, for which we have very poor data quality. And we are currently addressing this issue, and I'll be talking about these development substances also later. But this is how confidentiality was managed, by having two separate lists, and it was not possible to change a substance from development to approved. The EV code would change. So it was not a good way to manage substances. So when we went live with SMS, we migrated all these substances, both the approved and the development one. But we created this field that I have mentioned, the authorization state. And as the moment of SMS went live, we only started registering substances as authorized. So the development substances were blocked. They are still there, but they cannot be updated. No new development substances are created. All substances are registered by EMA data stewards, and they are all registered as approved. In addition, these development substances, they are not visible in the SMS API. The new consuming systems such as IRIS and UPD, they cannot use these substances. We are not making them available in the substance export, so we don't want these substances to be used. And we are currently mapping them, cleansing them, and nullifying them. And we are hoping that by the end of the year, we will have all these substances nullified, and all the substances will be authorized. So how are we managing confidentiality now? And since SMS gets substances from a very early stage, a lot of substance information is still confidential. And in order to protect these substances, we have a data field for data classification. And as I've already mentioned, a substance name can be either public or restricted. So if we register a name as public, then it will be visible in all the consuming systems, it will be visible in the API, and it will be visible in the substance export that we are making available in the support portal. If we register a name as restricted, then that name is only visible to the EMA data stewards in SMS and to NCAs via the API. What is very important to be aware is that the substance preferred term must always be public. So first, this is a validation rule, so it would technically not be possible to register a preferred term without being public. But if the preferred term was restricted, then you would also not be able to see that name in a consuming system. So even if a substance is at a very, very early stage, we might register with the company code as a preferred term, but that preferred term must always be public. Then another very important consideration is that official names such as the INN, USAN, pharmacopoeial names, these are always registered as public because these names are in lists that can be accessible by anyone. It's in the definition that for the INN they are non-proprietary. So every time there is an official name, we always register it as public. Now, giving a very general overview of the SMS data management process. So in terms of activities performed by the EMA data stewards, so we have the change requests. So data stewards create and update substances based on a request made by any support user. So it can be from industry, it can be from NCAs, it can be from EMA. All these change requests are processed by EMA data stewards. And in addition, some data services are performed, such as enrichments, mappings, and some simple data cleansing. Data stewards also provide customer service, and this is through requests for information, so general questions that any support user can make. Then the SMS business lead and product owner, which is me, is responsible for the data quality management, and this is the quality control, data profiling, and quality assurance processes to ensure that the activities being performed by the EMA data stewards are up to the expectations and that any issues found are addressed and the processes behind are improved. Then also service management activities, and more specifically coordinating with the data governance that Isabel mentioned in the data governance webinar on Monday, and also the IT delivery, so the new functionalities for SMS, and I'll be giving some practical examples later. Then there's also some performance management, such as invoicing, KPI reporting, and managing the customer satisfaction. Now, in terms of the data stewardships that I have just mentioned, so there's three main type of data services that we perform in SMS. Mappings. So mappings are matching substance data from legacy systems to SMS, and this might lead to the creation of new substance records or updating of already existing ones. And it supports data migration and the integration of SMS with telematic systems. Some examples of these data mappings was the mapping of veterinary NCA data that we have performed for the go live of UPD, so the Union Product Database, the veterinary product database. So we have mapped data for over 20 NCAs, so they're national data against SMS data to support the submission of products to UPD. We also mapped all the legacy orphan designations. So orphan designation had its own database with its own free text substances before. This procedure was then created in Iris, and all these legacy orphan designations, they were mapped against SMS, and they are all now available in Iris with the correct substances. And the XCVMPD development substance mapping that I have already mentioned. So first we mapped all these development substances against the approved substances. We were able to map a considerable number of them. There's still some outstanding. Some new approved substances were also created. And again, I'll be talking about this exercise later. Then in terms of enrichments, so this is proactive activity in order to complete our data in SMS with official reference information. And the reason why we do this is not only to improve data quality, but also to prevent change requests in order to minimize the burden on you. And we mainly do this for the INNs and USANs. So WHO publishes new INN lists 4 times per year, and every time a list is published, we go through all the list. We see which substances we already have, which substances we don't have yet, and we create or update as required in order to ensure that the INN is there, so that you don't have to ask us to add these INNs. It will already be there when you need it. And the same thing for USAN. USANs tend to be published on a monthly basis, so we do exactly the same thing. Then we also do data cleansing, and this is also a proactive activity to look at SMS data to try to identify and remove duplicates, but also to standardize the substance names against reference information. This also improves data quality, and it can also prevent change requests. So the substance validation group is cleansing the legacy substance data as it has been prioritized by the network. I will be giving concrete examples soon. As of today, 36% of the substances have been reviewed, but it's important to highlight that these 36% represent 100% of the active substances in veterinary authorized products. So all of the active substances for veterinary products have been reviewed, and 80% of the substances used in human authorized products have also been reviewed. So the focus or the prioritization has been done on authorized products. There's still many substances not yet reviewed, but these are mainly substances that are not yet in use in an authorized product, or it might be even substances that are used outside the EU, and we are just keeping them for ICSR recoding purposes. Now, talking about the cleansing, so as I mentioned, all the active substances from veterinary products have been cleansed and fully implemented, 100%. Then on the human side, we have completed the cleansing as well on the chemicals. Same thing for the insulins. In proteins, the focus was really just on the proteins linked to authorized products, and for polymers, since it's a much higher number, the focus was on the polymers mostly used in products. So for chemicals, insulins, and proteins, most of the findings by the SVG have been implemented in SMS. There are some pending changes because there are impacts in ICSRs and products in XCV-MPD. I'll be talking about that soon. But for polymers, since it's mainly excipients, it's been fully implemented. We also did a small data cleansing exercise on the OPA-dries and OPA-lux substances, also excipients, so we're able to fully implement it. And the cleansings that are ongoing are for vaccines, homeopathics, and mixtures. So as a outcome of these cleansings that I have mentioned, so you can see at the top for veterinary active substances, and you can see that 79% of these substances were considered invalid. So the data quality of veterinary substances was very poor, and the reason for this was these substances were never cleansed before. It contained veterinary substances coming from multiple different sources, so it led to many duplicates, and yeah, it was just the first ever data cleansing exercise on this group of substances. So it brought very significant data quality improvement. So we have nullified all these invalid substances. And then after this was performed, we mapped the NCA veterinary data to the valid substances only. Then for human substances, the levels of data quality were very different. So if we start with the chemicals, you can see that most of the chemicals didn't require any action. So 76% the substance record was correct. For insulins, more changes were required, so there were many duplicates here. Proteins with products also almost or most of the substances also didn't require an action. So it really depended on if that group of substances had been partially cleansed before or not. So for the chemicals, there was already a data cleansing exercise before. For insulins, there wasn't. So there's mixed levels of data quality from these exercises. And with the chemicals, the insulins, the proteins with products, the polymers with more products, and the OPA-dries and OPA-luxes and all these color-con excipients, we have now 80% of the substances used in products of good data quality. And as this cleansing is implemented in SMS, all the consuming systems benefit from this improved data quality. Now, in terms of impact for you of this cleansing, so based on this cleansing provided by the SVG. We have changed many substance names, and this could be through the form of changing the preferred term, adding new aliases, removing incorrect aliases, changing an alias to a translation. Then the Unicode, so the identifier from FDA, was also added when available. It's not always available. And for example, for the veterinary vaccines, there's no uni for this. But it's important to mention again that we were not able to change all the preferred terms the way we wanted, because changing a preferred term has an impact on ICSR recoding. So if it is a clear excipient, then we can go ahead with it. But for active substances, this needs to be done in a special exercise that we have not been able to do yet. However, these names are identified. We know exactly which names we need to change. We know to which name we need to change. So this activity is pending, but it's not forgotten. Then the substance status of many substances has changed, so from current to non-current. And for the invalid and duplicated substances, if they were not used in any medicinal product in XCV-MPD or in an ICSR, so we have been able to make it non-current. For some substances, since they are used in either a product or an ICSR or both, so we know that they need to be nullified, but we have not been able to do it yet. But for that, we have the substance validation group cleansed flag. So if in a substance record there is no cleansed flag at all, so this means the record has not been reviewed yet. If the flag is 1, so it has been reviewed and it is a valid substance. But if it is a 0, then it is a substance that should not be used and it's going to be nullified in the future, but we cannot nullify it at the moment because of the link to either a product or an ICSR. We do, however, have the replacement section in the replacement substance ID in the comment section, which is available in the export. So if you go to the substance export available in the Sport portal, you can see the SVG flag, you can see substances with a 0, and then you can go to the comment section and you can see the SMS ID and the EV code of the replacing substance. So you should correct your products if they are using these substances to the replacement substance. Eventually, we will also do a relinking exercise to point all these products to the correct substance. Also a separate exercise for the ICSRs. But as you can imagine, this is a very complex exercise. And yeah, there's a lot of considerations to be taken here. So if you are a marketing authorization holder and you do see that your product is using a substance that has a SVG flag 0, then you can already make that correction by seeing the replacement substance in the comment section. Now, going to the change request process. So a change request starts when a requester needs some change in a substance. The requester goes to EMA service desk, which is now based on ServiceNow. and can create a request to add or update a substance, and the substance request form and supporting documentation should be attached in this request. Then there is a validation stage where the EMA data steward analyze the request and analyzes all the supporting documentation and all the references relevant to that particular request and substance type. And this can be the SVG, data management manuals, data cleansing manual, the naming rules, some input from SVG discussions that might not be yet in a manual, and also external sources of information. It can be GSRS, so the FDA system to manage substance information. It can be pharmacopoeias. Different substance types have different sources, and all of these sources are considered during the change request validation. Then there's the approval or rejection of the request, and this can be done in consultation with the SVG. And I also want to highlight the SLAs here. So if a request is for a new substance or a new group of substances, but less than 20, then it's 5 to 10 working days. If it's for translations, then it's 10 to 15 working days. And for bulk requests that we sometimes receive, for example, for homeopathics, might be 100, it might be 1,000. So for these ones, we cannot guarantee an SLA because we don't know how many substances are coming in these requests, and it's very difficult to foresee when they will come and to estimate how long it will take to address them. So overall, priority is given to new substance requests, and you should keep in mind of these SLAs when you are planning a change request. Then once if the change request is approved, data is updated in SMS and it is automatically published in all the consuming systems. If the request is rejected, then the requester is given the reason why it was rejected, and usually an alternative substance ID is provided. What I also would like to reinforce here is that the new substances being currently created, they have a higher data quality than in the past because now they are being based on SVG-defined business rules. All the newly created substances might eventually be reviewed by the SVG, but the focus was on finalizing the legacy substances that are used in authorized products. So in order to create a change request, so you go to EMA service desk, you select SPOR, and you have a form here, request SMS services. So this is the form that you should be using to request the creation or update of any substance for whichever purpose. Then you will be seeing this form. So you will need to complete the subject, so title of the request, and then the description. In the description, it's important to, if it is for a new substance, to briefly describe the substance. If it's an update, to provide either the SMS ID or the EV code of the substance that you would like to update it, and the name that you would like to be updated to. Then there is also a mandatory field, which is request type. And this is the regulatory procedure for which you plan to use this substance. And this is important for us to know because different regulatory procedures have different business rules. For example, if you want to apply for an orphan designation with that substance, then the preferred term cannot be a company code. So if we see in the substance request the substance to be registered with a preferred term company code, and then here we see orphan designation, then we'll be contacting the requester and saying that for the purpose of orphan designation, this name is not accepted. However, if it is a clinical trial or scientific advice, then the company code can be used as preferred term. So this is a very important field to populate correctly because it might affect the way the substance will be registered. Then in attachments, you should provide a substance request form that I'll be showing in the next slide, and supporting documentation. So depending on the type of procedure, the stage of development of the substance and the product, there might be more or less documentation available. So we are flexible here. So it can be an SMPC, investigator brochures, internal monographs, draft sections from the orphan designation application or the scientific advice application. We just need to see information on the substance structure and nomenclature, and yeah, this is essential for registering the substance. Unless the substance is already in the public domain, or if there is an INN or a USAN, then supporting documentation is not required. You can just refer to the INN or USAN. But since we are doing the data enrichment, in theory, that scenario should not happen because all of those substances should already be available. Then this is the current substance request form. So it's free text. You just complete all the names that you would like to have registered, and then you have a column where you can adjust if you want the name public or restricted. So public names everyone can see, restricted names only EMA data stewards and NCA can see. But I want to reinforce again, at least one name must be public, which will be the preferred term. So I see many times like the form all populated and then all the names restricted. So this is not possible. One name must be public. It can be a company code, but there needs to be one public name. Otherwise, the substance cannot be registered and you could not see the substance. In addition, official names are always public. So the recommended INN or the proposed INN or the USAN or a name from the pharmacopoeia, these names are in the public domain. The structure is published at the time of these names. Anyone can see all the information on the substance at that stage. So we cannot register an INN or a USAN as restricted. In addition, for orphan designation, pediatric investigation plan, and marketing authorization application, the company code cannot be used as the preferred term. So if there is no INN at this stage, then a systematic name or a common name need to be used instead. Now, in terms of data quality management, so on a daily basis, there's all of these data stewardship activity tasks that I have mentioned. And every time these tasks are performed, there is a quality control process in place. So there is a sampling depending on the type of tasks that can go up to 100%. And all these tasks are confirmed by another person to ensure that no errors were made. And then on top of it, there is a second round of verification, the quality assurance, which goes deeper. It tries to identify root causes and changes the processes to prevent that mistake again. Then both findings from this quality control and quality assurance, they are classified as major or minor. And I'll be giving some examples in the next slide. So overall, the data quality is being improved as per the implementation of the cleansing done by the SVG. And on top of it, the new substances are being created with higher data quality, again, thanks to the business rules that SVG is defining. And on top of it, we also have these data quality management processes to ensure that all of this is kept in place and the levels of quality are what we expect. And what we have defined as data quality for SMS is that there should be less than 1% of major errors, and for 2022 we had much less than that, and less than 10% of minor errors, and we also achieved that goal. Now, just to give some examples of the errors that we would consider in SMS. So for major errors, so these would be errors that either has an impact, a considerable impact in a regulatory procedure, or they affect confidentiality. So selecting a preferred term, so this can be very disruptive to orphan designations and pediatric investigation plans, so having the company code as the preferred term in this context, or selecting the incorrect data classification, so the requester asks the substance to be registered as restricted, and the substance is not in the public domain, there's no INN, there's no USAN, and if it's registered as public, that would also be considered a major error, or duplicated substances created. Then on minor errors, so these are really minor things. The substance was registered like all in upper cases, or abbreviations were used, or a parent substance was not created. And just to further elaborate on this, so whenever we get a change request for a salt, for example, we will not just register the salt. So we will register the salt, and we will also register the parent substance, would be the free base, to ensure that we have all the related substances, because the free base will eventually be needed at some point if the product is approved, and it will likely be needed at the stage of marketing authorization application. So we register not only the substances that you request, we also register the substances that we think you will need in the future. So this would be an example of a minor error not doing that activity. Now, just some very brief statistics on SMS. So on the left side, you can see the number of substances. As expected, it's been increasing every year. And on the right, you can see the substance names also increasing. There was a bigger increase from 2020 to 2021, and this is because we did a lot of legacy enrichments and all these data mappings for the NCAs. So we did create more substances than normal. And yeah, then from 2021 to 2023, we still got 3,000 new substances. Then in terms of change requests, so the number of change requests has also been increasing over the past years. So from 2021, it increased 8%, but despite this increase in the volumes, the SLAs are still being met and actually have increased compared to 2021. Then if we look at the statistics of the type of requests, so if it's a request for a create, an update, or a mixed request where it's for both creating substances and updating substances, so you can see that most of the requests were always for new substances. And you might be noticing that there's an apparent decrease in the change requests, when in the previous slide I just said there was an increase. So in the previous slide, it was the total number of requests, and here it's just the validated ones. So you can see that in 2022, we approved 77% of the requests. So there were 23% of rejections, and this was mainly due to incorrect requests, request type, because we changed the EMA service desk platform, and in first month's transition period, many requests were incorrectly created, so we had a lot of rejections, mainly because of that. Now, if you look at the regulatory procedure that triggered that change request, most of the requests were either XCVMPD or for clinical trials. So this has been a trend that I have been seeing in the past years. So clinical trials and XCVMPD. So XCVMPD, UDRA-CT, CTIS are the most common to trigger a substance request, because for clinical trials, it's very early stages, so we don't have a way to proactively register these substances. While for XCVMPD, mainly it's for the purposes of pharmacovigilance, so it's not so much for approved products, it's more for the pharmacovigilance module, where we do get substances that are not used in any product in the EU, so they come from third countries, and there's many substances that are just reported in ICSR, and we still need to register those, despite they are not used in any product in the EU. Then here you can see the comparison in the volumes between mappings, cleansings, and enrichments. And in 2021, you can see mappings were the biggest activity. This was for the UPB mappings, while in 2022 it was mainly cleansing. And this was because we were implementing the cleansing that the SVG has done on chemicals, proteins, and polymers. There was also considerable number of enrichments. So we did look through all the INN lists that were published by WHO since ever to ensure that we have all the INNs registered, and we also did most of the mapping of the development substances. So despite all of these activities, the number of customer service questions was neglectable. So you cannot even see it here in comparison with the rest. You can see it here. So we only got 122 questions in last year, so it's about 10 a month. And yeah, despite it has increased slightly compared to the previous year, it's still a very small number in the context of all the data activities that we performed. And most of these questions were about this transition that we have done in the service desk platform, and also some questions about CTIS, so not exactly about substance process or data quality, but we do also support colleagues in CTIS with the substance issues. And overall, we have complied with the SLAs for these questions. Now, in terms of customer satisfaction, so every year we run a customer satisfaction survey in the end of the year, and what we got in the end of 2022 was that 80% of the users considered our data services as either good or excellent, and 74% considered the data quality either good or excellent. So we were happy with the results. Now, in terms of information, documentation, and overall help about SMS. So I do acknowledge that there's limited documentation and guidance available for SMS, but we do have something, and in the support portal, since we are not fully integrated there, you can only see the general SLAs and the customer satisfaction survey, but now you also have the substance exports. I'll be showing them later. In terms of webinars, you can see it on the EMA YouTube channel, the webinar that was done in September. In the EMA service desk, you have the form to request new substances or updated substances. There's documentation, quite a lot published by the SVG that you can get in the Unicom website. Now there's also a HMA page describing the role and activities of the SVG. And in the corporate website, you can get some general information on sport. I do acknowledge that this is not enough, and there's still a lot of improvement to be done, but the documentation will be our top priority for this year, and I will be talking about that soon. So just very briefly, SMS in other project systems and regulatory procedures. So substances from SMS are being used in almost all regulatory procedures and the respective consuming systems since very early stages. Can be scientific advice 10 years before marketing authorization application happens, orphan designation 20 years before, ATMP certification, innovation task force, then actual marketing authorization application, all the ICSRs and SUSARs before, clinical trials before marketing authorization, after marketing authorization, variations, renewals, and soon there's going to be one more procedure using SMS data, which will be for antimicrobial sales and use data. So this is a future veterinary database. It's going to be called AZU, and it will also get substances from SMS. So right now we have all these systems: UDRCT, CTIS, IRIS, USRS, EAF, and DABI when it goes fully live for all the applications, SciMed, which is our internal system to manage centralized procedure activities, UPD, recent system for veterinary products, UDRA GMDP, XCVMPD, and UDRA Vigilance Veterinary. All these systems consume substance from SMS, and whenever we make a change, whenever we improve data quality in SMS, all these systems get the data, all these processes benefit from it. So, what is new in SMS? If you go to the Sport portal and you click on the tab Substances, so we already had an export of the current substances, but now there's a separate export where you can also see the non-current substances if you want to see some historical data and which replacement substance you should use for those ones. And both the current and non-current exports, they have the same structure, they have the same data fields, and it is the SMS ID, primary identifier, previously known as UTCT ID, but yeah, same string of numbers. Then we have the substance name, where all name types are mentioned. The is preferred term, so if there is a yes, it's a preferred term. If there is a no, then it's an alias or a translation. There can only be one preferred term. Language can be in any EU language, but the preferred term and the aliases are always in English. The source that I've already mentioned, the domain, status, substance type, the comments, which we are using mainly to populate the SMS ID and EV code of the replacement substance, then created and last updated date, the EV code, which is only applicable to human substances, the SVG cleansed flag, again, 1 is a valid substance, 0 invalid substance that will be nullified in the future, and if it's empty, it's not been reviewed yet. And then we have also the substance identifier from FDA, the UNI. Now, in terms of planned activities for this year, so what we have done so far, we have already improved our processes with incidents, so there's the same way that other sport domains will no longer handle incidents as business activities. So same thing in SMS. There's only requests and requests for information, which are the questions. Incidents are about IT issues, and since you cannot have direct access to SMS yet, because there is no portal yet, then you cannot have IT issues in SMS yet. Then in terms of more general data management, so we will continue with our outsourcing process, and more substance types are planned to be outsourced this year, namely the herbals and homeopathics. And then we also have several automations in the pipeline to streamline even more our data management activities. And we are also working closely with the SVG to create processes and improve the already existing processes to ensure that the data between SMS and USRS is always aligned. And then data quality, so we have this development substances activity that I have mentioned. We also very soon in the coming weeks will add inches and molecular formula to all the chemicals, and we have the INNs and USAN enrichments that we will continue to do all over the year whenever they are available. Then in terms of cleansing, we will aim to cleanse the herbals and homeopathics and human vaccines, and we also plan to do some process improvement around the data profiling. Documentation. So right now we are currently focusing on the internal data steward manual to review all the process, because there's been a lot of changes when we transitioned to the ServiceNow system, and we are currently consolidating these internal processes first, and then we will reuse all the relevant sections from this document to finally provide external guidance on substances. So all the processes, all the activities that we do, how to submit a change request, a lot of details on confidentiality, and this is it's quite a complex document to ensure that all these processes are clearly described. We need to discuss them with the key user group and with the SVG. So that's why the arrow goes until Q4, but this is really a priority. We really want to ensure that you have good information, not only to create a change request, but also to understand all these activities that we are doing. Then in terms of modernization, so there's this information management modernization initiative that has already been mentioned in previous webinars. For SMS more specifically, we are planning to further enhance the substance export with a few more data fields, and we are hoping to make the SMS API available to all users by the end of the year, because right now only NCAs can have access to it. Then we'll be supporting all the prioritized epics and related projects. And what we are also doing right now is preparing for the technology selection for the SMS user interface. So there's a few options, and we are hoping by the end of the quarter the technology will be fully decided, but then this still needs to be prioritized in the context of all the other projects to see when the development can actually start. So the reasons why we are doing these things. So automations, just to streamline our work and to ensure that you can benefit from it even quicker. So we are doing automations both for INNs and USENs. Development substances, so I've mentioned it quite a few times. We don't want anyone to be able to use any development substance. So many of them have already been nullified, but others, they are linked to products. So we will be contacting all the sponsors that are owners of these products to first ask them to update the products. If that does not happen, then we will perform a data fix and we will relink the development product from a development substance to an approved substance. However, we can only do this when we have a replacement substance. So some of these development substances, they only have a company code. We cannot find any information on this code anywhere. So we'll also be contacting other sponsors to provide us supporting documentation so that we can register the replacement substance. Then once all of these activities are done, we have all the substances replaced, then we can actually nullify it, because we cannot nullify a substance that is linked to a product. Then in terms of new data fields, so we are creating a data field for the INCHI key to help us with the registration of chemicals. The molecular formula already exists, but we are preparing a data fix to populate this also for all the chemicals. And we are also creating a data field dedicated to the replacement substance so that we don't have to use the comment section, because sometimes the comment section is actually used for other comments. So eventually we will move that information to the replacement substance data field. And when we finish populating all these data fields, we will make them available in the next version of the substance export. Then we will also work on some data profiling and monitoring to further increase and maintain the data quality of SMS. And this will be run then on a weekly basis to ensure that any issues are detected and corrected very quickly. And the documentation. So the aim is to prepare two different documents. So a more general document describing principles of SMS, all the consuming systems, how often these systems get the data, all these activities that we are doing, and the confidentiality of substances. So this document is for SMS users, people that want to know more about SMS. So this will be a longer document, and then a shorter document will be prepared, just focused on change requests, and this will be for the stakeholders that don't are not interested in knowing about SMS. They just want to register one substance one time, and that's it. So this will be a shorter document, like really focused just in the change request process. Then the API, I've already mentioned, we are hoping to get this API available to any users, so more specifically the industry users, because NCAs already have access. So we are hoping to be able to provide this access in Q4, but it still needs to be confirmed. And the SMS user interface. So right now we are preparing for the technology selection. Once this technology selection is completed, then this epic still needs to be prioritized before the development of this portal can actually begin. So, almost done. Takeaways and conclusions. So, based on the statistics that I've provided, the customer satisfaction, we can conclude that the data stewardship and customer services that are in place have an excellent performance. And I have mentioned quite a few times this big activity that we are doing around development substances. So this is just for general awareness, but any sponsors that will be impacted specifically by this exercise will be further communicated in advance for this mapping, relinking, nullification exercise that we are doing on development substances. So I have mentioned the future plans, so the enhancement of the substance export, all the automations and profiling that we are planning to do, and that we are currently analyzing the user interface and the API. And I hope by the next webinar I will be able to provide more concrete dates on these two topics. And we are addressing your customer feedback. So we acknowledge that documentation is very limited at the moment, and this will be really our focus. And again, in the next webinar, I'm hoping that there's going to be more concrete information on this. And that was it from my side. And we will now be moving to Slido for the questions.
Thank you, Pedro. Just before you start answering the questions, we had again a huge amount of questions, so the team managed to answer some of them. The rest we will address in a FAQ, and Pedro will answer only some questions that have been the most users interested in. Thank you. And while Pedro gets ready with the questions, maybe after the Q&A, we will also have a short survey where we would like your feedback, which we already got some from the previous webinars, which we really value, and it gave us some great insights. So we would really like you to give us your feedback on this one as well. Thank you.
Okay, so can you see Slido?
Yes, we can see that. And if you could go for the start questions, because some of the questions were already answered. There we are. Thank you.
Okay, so first question, when the NCA wants to assign a different substance name than the one in the English, in the common approved English text, not even alias or translation, what should we do? How to convince the NCA to use the translation of the English term? Not sure if I get this question. So we, in terms of translations, so we register the translations that are provided by requesters, and we do analyze the SMPC and the package leaflet, and yeah, we register these names in SMS. But if an NCA wants to assign a different name We also register all the aliases. Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully understand this question, so maybe if this person can provide more information, then I can try to come back to this question later. Then substance type and name source, will this be explained later on this presentation. So substance type and name source are RMS lists that are publicly visible. So you can go to RMS, you can see all the substance types that are there. So all the current substance types that you see in RMS are being used in SMS. In terms of sources, so the name of this list is source of information, and only a subset of these sources are being used in SMS because this list contains sources for other purposes as well. So it's both these data fields are controlled vocabulary lists coming from RMS. Then we have a question on the export. Is preferred name true or false? What does it mean? So if this field says true, then this name in that particular line is the preferred term. If it says false, then it's an alias if it's in English, or a translation if it's in any other language. And yeah, the reason why this is a true or false in the export, it's because in SMS this is a flag. So we tick if a substance is if a name is the preferred term or not. So that's why then in the export it becomes a true or false. Then when a substance is made non-current, do we receive a message to change it in our products already informed in XCV-MPD, how it is managed in relationship with the EV? Okay, so you do not receive a message because we do not nullify substances that are linked to products. So this is the main concern, the limitation that we have during the cleansing is that we need to identify if a substance is used in a product in XCV-MPD before nullifying them. So we will never nullify a substance, make it non-current, if there are any products in XCV-MPD. If there are products, then we just add a flag 0 that I have mentioned, the SVG cleanse flag that you can see in the export. But for this one, you don't get any notification because the flag is not available in XCV-MPD. Then how long it takes to update the SMS Excel sheet after receiving notification from EMA that a substance is registered. So I'm assuming that this SMS Excel sheet is the substance export from the Sport portal. So this substance export is refreshed on a daily basis. So if your substance is registered now, then it should be in the export tomorrow because it's refreshed overnight. Then what is it meant by mandatory data fields? To register the development substance, it is only required to provide a preferred term and its classification. It's the other data populated by EMA. So like I've mentioned, development substances cannot be registered anymore. So if you try to create a development substance in XCV-MPD, it will be automatically rejected by the system. If you create a change request for a substance for a clinical trial, then indeed you can just provide the names and classification, but we will be populating all the other mandatory fields that have been shown in the presentation. Then question, if some substance names are not found in the current SMS export tracker, are those substance names going to be available in the SMS portal in the near future? So if they are not in the export, it might mean that we don't have them registered at all. And in that case, you should submit a change request to register them. Or there might be some technical issue in the export, but I think we had addressed the technical issues in the export, and now it should be up to date. Then new substance requests are usually created by EMA using company codes. This is an issue when assigning RPIs in IRIS and is not acceptable for orphan designation and pediatric investigation plan. Will the template form be updated to include selecting for regulatory procedure? So you can select the regulatory procedure in ServiceNow. So when you are creating the substance request, we will try to make it even more clear in the substance request form that information, despite there's already a statement saying exactly that there. But we will consider other ways as well to improve the form to make sure that this is clear for applicants. Then, is the substance CV code, substance ID identical for the substance name and substance code? Like I've mentioned in the presentation, so all these data fields are different, but they are mapped almost one-to-one. So the SMS ID is mapped one-to-one to EV code, so the same EV code cannot be used in two different substance records. Same for the SMS ID, those are unique substance identifiers. Then a substance might have multiple names, but only one name is the INN. And then there might be multiple substance external codes. Then when do you add a translation to a substance in UTCT? Some have it, others don't. So UTCT is a very old system that is planned to be decommissioned after we get the SMS user interface. And there's some limitations that UTCT only displays one translation per language. So if there's two German translations, then probably you will only be able to see one of them. But you might also see no translations, and that means that we just don't have any translations in SMS because no one has ever requested it. So at the moment, there is no proactive enrichment on translations. So this is in the longer future pipeline, especially for centralized procedure. But at the moment, we only register translations when requested. Then during the submission in CTIS, we faced twice the same situation. A substance was registered in SMS4. In XCV MPD, EU product number was registered. In CTIS, the two numbers, substance and product, never work together. Where are we making mistakes? So this might be related to the development substances. So you might have registered a product with the approved substance, and then you are adding the development substance EV code in CTIS, or vice versa. The product might have been registered with the development substance, and you are adding the EV code of the approved substance. So in order for CTIS to work, you need to check which substance is used in the product that you have registered. and that way you should be able to find it in CTIS. And this is another reason why we are so focused in this development substance replacement mapping nullification, because it causes situations like this in CTIS, because there is a development substance EV code or multiple development substance EV codes, then there is the approved substance EV code, and users struggled then to find their products in CTIS. So we want to ensure that all development substances are no longer possible to use anywhere, so that there is only one EV code for substances, which is mapped one-to-one to the SMS ID, to ensure that situations like this do not happen anymore. Then, which substance attributes are required for which substance types? So this is a very good question. So this is something that we will address in the change request process documentation, because different substance types will require different information. So for a chemical, we would need a systematic name. For a protein, that happens to be an antibody, so we will also need a target, but also the immunoglobulin type, the source of that immunoglobulin, any relevant structural modifications. And I know that this is not documented at this stage, but this is what we are working on, to create this list of requirements per substance type in order for you to prepare properly for the request, and to ensure that then the substance can be registered timely. Then, does cleansed active substance contain the characteristics of chemical, biological, or advanced therapy character? I'm not sure if this is a question on the veterinary substances. So if it's for veterinary substances, then we have cleansed all the active substances, regardless of the type. So we cleanse the chemicals, the proteins, and the cell therapies. If it's for human substances, for now, it's chemicals, all cleansed, proteins used in products, all cleansed, advanced therapy, so cell therapy, gene therapy, not yet. Then I see another highly voted question. Using OpenDrive products as example, how does data cleanse impact this group of products? Will each individual manufacturer product code be eventually included within SMS list with a unique substance ID, or more general SMS terms to be used, the current list? So for this exercise in particular, what we have done was going through all the OpenRISE, OpenLux, and other related excipients, and we validate them all against the manufacturer specification, and each individual excipient or OpenDry or OpenLux has its own SMS IDs. So we will have OpenDry 123 red with one ID, OpenDry green 456 with a different ID. And these are the substance IDs that you should use in your application. So for OpenDries, you would likely only be using them in marketing authorization applications. So we still have some general ones, just like OpenDry or OpenLux, but this is because they are linked to products, but we do want to nullify them in the future, so that for each product we know exactly which excipient is being used. And I think I've covered all the start the questions.
Yes, I think for now, yes, we have received a big amount of questions right now. My colleague's still reviewing. We only marked at the start the questions that have been not answered. So if there are any questions that have been top voted but they were answered in chat, we will not address them here. So please have a look. Maybe you can find the answer there. There is no more question anymore. So if I can just launch the survey before you leave, and if you could give us your feedback, it would be fantastic. Thank you very much. And we will see you maybe soon or maybe at the next webinar. Thank you for the participation.
Thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, we will be in touch in the next webinar.